get it,
Thank you very much. Hi, folks. We're going to start in just a minute. If you can get some food, at least some cookies, get situated. I want to get us underway. We have a pretty full agenda.
You took it as role model,
first time in the workplace.
Okay. We ready to rock and roll here? What do you think, Keith? Are we expecting a few more people, or is this pretty much?
I think we're about at capacity.
Okay, all right. Great. So, welcome, everyone. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening and joining us for pizza and cookies. It's a good thing. So I'm Stephen Buxbaum, Mayor of Olympia, and I'm going to do a short introduction to the meeting this evening. Agendas are on the table in front of you all, and Keith, I'm assuming there's handouts for folks in the audience as well. Okay. So
There are none.
there are now. All right. Well, good. So the agenda this evening is before you. I'm going to give a short introduction. We're going to have a presentation from our dynamic consultant, Lorelei from Eco Northwest, and I know that we have had a couple of two CAC Citizens Advisory Committee meetings earlier in the year, and then we've had a combination of some lunch group meetings, and then I've had small work sessions with, I think, almost all of you that are around the table. So if it's okay, well, I just want to launch into the agenda, if that's all right.
Yes.
But again, I'm going to give a short introduction. We're going to have a report on what is the second component of Eco Northwest's work related to the Community Renewal Area project. We're going to hear directly from the ad hoc Community Renewal Committee, which is myself, Mayor Pro Tem Jones, and Councilmember Langer. And then we're going to have a discussion with all of you and try to get some feedback and some initial impressions about where we are at the moment in terms of our thinking about the Community Renewal Area. Towards the end of the meeting, Lorelei is going to introduce a concept of an exercise that involves our next steps, or what our proposed next steps are for the Community Renewal Area project. So that's basically the agenda. I want to just say, to start, I see this as a continuation of our dialogue around community renewal, the concept of a community renewal area for our downtown and downtown development. So really a lot of what tonight is about is just deepening the conversation amongst the Citizens Advisory Committee. And I think of you again as opinion leaders in our community that represent some of the best and the brightest perspectives on community development in Olympia. And I want to reinforce this was the place that we wanted to start in terms of getting a conversation going about the concepts of community renewal and see if this was a right fit approach for our moving our downtown forward. We have some extraordinary challenges with our downtown, which we'll hear about in part tonight from our consultants report, but I also feel like all of us are familiar with some of the things that we're facing in terms of barriers to development in our downtown. And the paradox is, I also think that we have one of the most incredible settings in the entire Pacific Northwest for a downtown to inhabit. So working through that paradox and figuring out how to move things forward in a way that is sustainable within a city budget that is not at all sustainable and is facing extraordinary challenges on our capital facility needs and declining revenues, and how to figure out a path forward. That's what I'm counting on the collective group to help do. So, what do you think? We ready for a presentation? All right, Lorelei.
Hello, everybody. How are you?
Good.
Good. It's like church with the responsiveness.
Thank
I'll work on the dynamic aspects of it, I guess. So I do have a presentation, but I can promise you that it's going to be fairly brief. A lot of what I'm going to be doing is kind of reminding you of where we are in the process, because all of the new content that we have to discuss tonight actually comes from the ad hoc committee recommendations. So I want to make sure that we reserve enough time for that discussion to occur, and as such I'm probably going to move through this pretty quickly. There will be some time for questions, but probably pretty limited, and if you have issues or concerns that are specific to the technical analysis that I'm going to blow through here pretty quickly, then come find me afterwards and we can talk through it. And I do want to start by talking about, about the component A work, which was part of our contracted scope. And that was to develop an investment strategy that looks at a series of opportunity areas across the city. And these were opportunity areas that were selected initially by the ad hoc committee because they were places where the vision for redevelopment didn't quite seem to be aligning with reality, and the city was interested in developing an action plan that would help to move them a little bit closer. So what we have developed, and we did present this to council some months ago, what we did is take a look across all these opportunity areas, sort of meet them where they are, and develop a series of short, medium, and long-term actions for each of the sites that can help to move them closer to their vision. And downtown is one of those. So this broader context is important because it helps to tell the story of why we're focused in on downtown. So how did we develop that strategy? We did talk with property owners and with stakeholders in each of the areas and get a sense of what they understood the barriers to redevelopment to be. We also did a pretty comprehensive market analysis that looked at achievable rents and vacant land and redevelopment potential, and from there tried to really hone in on what are the market-related barriers to development in each of these areas. And then we developed, in consultation with the ad hoc committee and with the stakeholders, a series of actions that could be taken in each area. And we used this framework to think about redevelopment. And I don't think I have shared this with this particular group before, so I'll go through it so that it hopefully makes some sense to you. The concept is this horizontal line that runs right through the middle that says feasibility hurdle. That's a hypothetical line where the development costs are roughly equal to the end value of a product. So it costs about as much to build the development as it then is worth when it's done, and that's kind of it's a proxy for development interest in a particular site. It's not a perfect sort of mark of feasibility, but it's a way conceptually to think about a private investor potentially being attracted to a site. And when you look at each of the sites, you can kind of place them somewhere along this diagonal line relative to this feasibility hurdle. Are they Are they way down below in the nurture triad, where really what you need to be doing is sort of thinking about laying the groundwork for development? You're getting your zoning in place, you're making sure your infrastructure works, you're preparing for the market to change enough that an investment makes sense? Or is it more in this middle triad where you're very close to the feasibility hurdle and you just kind of need to give it a little bit of a push to get it over the edge and start to see private investment happening? Or is it in the third triad, and I'll give you the hint that none of the opportunity sites were quite there yet. And that's where the market is already producing development that aligns with the vision, but there's still public investment that's needed and public attention that's needed, primarily in terms of maintaining, maybe it's sort of implementing your development code and continuing to enforce your development code, maintaining the infrastructure that's already been developed, and in some cases dealing with some of the challenges of growth and success that look a lot like traffic congestion in a lot of situations. So we placed each of those opportunity areas, based on the conversations and the technical analysis, somewhere along this line, and relative to their vision for development. So I'll just, the Headwaters site, let me go back to the map so that really quickly, just so that we, all know which one that is. That is, do I have a thing? Yeah. Over here, has some wetlands issues. It's deficient in terms of infrastructure. There's some plans for major road investments. There's a lot of expense and a lot of challenges associated with development. So the cost of developing that site is very far from the feasibility hurdle. So we put that one there. Whereas downtown, you're already starting to see some investment in downtown, but there are still a lot of barriers and still a push that's needed. And then for each of the sites, we developed a series of short, medium, and long-term actions that the public sector could be taking to try to move them forward. And without going through them in a lot of detail, when we're in the nurture category, it's in the short term, it's a lot of preparing for the next market cycle to hit. It's a lot of working with property owners, making sure that the zoning is in place and getting the development table set so that when the market cycle, the next one hits, it could go. These are more related to, these ones are a little bit closer and in some cases relate to actually making investments and working more directly with property owners that may have a development deal in hand right now. So that context is important because downtown is one of those where it's time to start working directly with the property owners and to really crystallize the vision and start trying to take some action, because in this current investment cycle, there's some opportunities to capture some new development. Why downtown? Mayor said it well in the introduction. I would imagine that you wouldn't all be here around the table if you don't believe that there needs to be at least some change in downtown. It's not capturing, it's pretty clear from our market analysis, which I know we went through in more detail last time I talked to you, that the downtown area is just, it's not capturing its fair share of regional growth. There's been very little new development happening here over time. And the region really needs a successful downtown. The lack of private investment means that the tax base is lower here and that other parts of the city are subsidizing the cost of servicing downtown. And it needs to be a vibrant, active place so that businesses can be successful and can thrive. Why is it not successful? Well, there's blight. There are buildings that have very serious health and safety issues. There are issues with soil contamination, there are issues with flooding and sea level rise, and a number of different variables that make it more difficult and more expensive to develop in downtown, which affects the development feasibility and creates challenges. There's some pictures of the blight. This is not hypothetical health and safety blight. These are buildings that are in downtown Olympia right now. So why CRA? Just as a quick reminder, community renewal is a statutorily authorized tool available in the state of Washington to help to overcome some of the constitutional barriers to dealing with public sector investment in private properties. So with community renewal, the city has more flexibility and more authority to be able to invest directly in private properties to remove barriers and to help to achieve redevelopment goals. It's one tool among multiple that frankly would be needed in downtown, but it's a piece of the puzzle that lets the public sector sit more directly at the table and work in a better partnership with the private sector. Echo Northwest, we put together a feasibility study report, which is in your packet. And the key findings from that study were that yes, it is technically feasible to use community renewal, and yes, it is a tool that would be helpful, that is well suited to the kinds of development challenges that the downtown Olympia has. However, it's pretty important as we move forward into this planning process that we get more specific about what kinds of actions we might be taking with community renewal. In fact, the statutes require that happen in order to get an adopted community renewal plan in place. And that community renewal is not this silver bullet tool. It needs to be paired with other tools. Community renewal doesn't bring any additional dollar value to the equation for the public sector. So making sure that there are other tools in place to help to support an overall development strategy. And then, we have heard pretty clearly from this group and from other stakeholders that there's some concern and some lack of understanding about what community renewal is exactly. And our report highlighted the fact that as this conversation continues, it needs to be very transparent and very honest to make sure that all of these stakeholder concerns are understood and addressed. So that's the lead-in then from where our recommendations and our findings fall off, and we hand it over to the ad hoc committee to talk about, this is all new information to you, some additional consideration and conversation that's been happening on the topics that you see behind me with the ad hoc committee over the last couple months. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Lorelei. So what I was going to suggest, and have just really quickly conferred with my colleagues about doing, which we did not rehearse this, but I wanted to suggest that we each take one of the components and talk briefly about some of our thinking up to this point about recommendations relative to an approach towards a CRA. And I was going to start with Councilmember Langer and just talking about the boundary as we're describing it. I think we've got yes, thank you. So, Steve, can I put you on the spot for that?
Absolutely. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. We've actually had a number of meetings and here recently, and we were trying to figure out what the best boundary would be for the community renewal area, and we actually ended up trying to think about, a baby bear, a mama bear, and a papa bear version, and then we sort of ended up with a grandpa bear version of what we should do as far as size of the community renewal area. So we've decided to take in West Bay, the Isthmus, downtown, and the Port Peninsula as our urban as our community renewal area. And there were several reasons for that that we can talk more about later, but the primary reason was that it's easier to start bigger than smaller. There are sites in each of those areas that have potential for urban renewal and removal of blight, and that it really makes sense to take that in and then address issues that we just have a better way of addressing those issues as they come up, rather than having to start over again with each area. So that was what we decided at this point. So I'm going to pass it on to our next council member, Jones, and he will talk a little bit about the governance, which is the next issue that we discussed.
So I think I can be very brief, but what I'd like to do would be to turn you to the packet in front of you, and you'll find that there's a memorandum. It's a smaller packet, and on page 2 of that lays out 3 different options for governance of the community redevelopment or economic redevelopment approach. And essentially these 3 can be thought of as being on a continuum of their autonomy or their connection to the city council and city governance. In our discussion, and as I understand what we're doing here is discussing the committee's dialogue up to this point and what at this point we believe is a recommendation to the full council. And we're taking a stock and wanting to get feedback from you before we move forward. But what we believe is that the creation of a public development authority is probably premature for Olympia. We're just getting started. We're trying to get our feet on the ground. Likewise, an appointed board, which has a very strong tie to the city council, but is not the city council, often would be made up of elected officials, also is a little bit unwieldy, given, again, that we're in a startup mode and that we're looking at a relatively small set of resources to apply to the development area. So our recommendation or our dialogue at this point has really focused on keeping governance with the city council, with the idea that it may mature over time and there may be interest in moving in some other direction. But we really are looking for streamlined and simplicity in governance. So that's where our discussion has been up to this point.
Nathaniel called your attention to the memo that we're working from tonight, and I want to just move on to page 5 and talk just very briefly about properties of interest. And again, this is an area, one of our areas of discussion. We landed pretty easily on those properties within the proposed community renewal area that are sites that we're particularly concerned about the impact of their current condition, which I think we can characterize very fairly as being blighted on the whole of downtown. And that list goes from West Bay Drive with the Reliable Steel property to the 2 recent acquisitions that the city made on the Isthmus, which include the former Health Department property and the former Thurston County Housing Authority property, the Capitol Center Tower property on the Isthmus as well, and then the Griswolds property on 4th Avenue. Those were specific sites that we felt certainly could be characterized without much argument as blighted structures. I also want to talk about the 4th area of discussion, and it's I think a reasonable segue from our properties of interest or concern. The issue of condemnation has been something that has come up in our dialogue around CRA, and we want to approach this issue thoughtfully and respectfully, and be as clear as we can about what conditions we might consider condemnation. And again, listed in the memo, we were being very specific that where we've landed at the moment for point of discussion is that we would only consider condemnation for any property or building that the city had determined meets the statutory definitions of health and safety blight. And there is a fairly high standard of what economic blight is, as characterized in the community renewal statute. But also we wanted to be very clear that we're only considering the use of condemnation for properties that have been vacant and economically unproductive for a period of at least 5 years or longer. And we were landing on that as an initial definition to try to really be clear for property owners in the area of interest what it is we're taking into consideration for use of condemnation. So those are the basic 4 substantive areas that we've had conversations about at this point in time at the ad hoc committee level, where we've actually landed on where our general comfort is in terms of moving the discussion forward. And again, the point this evening is to engage with folks and around what you just heard in terms of our own recommendations, and take a little bit of time to clarify what the objectives are that we're trying to achieve through a community renewal area ordinance, and get some feedback. So some of the things that I think would be helpful in terms of information back from you all would be, what would you like more information about in terms of our recommendations? I know that we've had our small group meetings and have had a fairly vigorous discussion at a small group level. This is an opportunity for the entire Citizens Advisory Committee to sort of share some observations and share information together. The other two things that I think would be helpful are what areas of our recommendations do you agree with? And of course, we want to know also what you have concerns about. And not only what you have concerns about, but also what kinds of suggestions you have for us to address those concerns. And I think I want to do a little bit of discussion first around that, and then we'll do some temperature taking as the discussion goes further. And I know we've got, Renee, it looked like you wanted to ask a question, and Bill wants to jump in, but can I just quickly go to my colleagues? Anything that we've left out at this point in terms of recommendations? Okay, Renee, and then followed by Bill, and then followed by Rachel.
Just point of order. But would it be okay to go around and do introductions again and just?
I think we're all here, so we might as well do that. And so I do want to welcome everybody again. I think Rachel brings up a good point. Do you want to do that real quickly? Okay. So Jim, welcome.
Sorry for coming late.
No,
I'm
you're
not
fine.
one of the reasons you're delayed doing this. My name is Jim Randall. I live here in Olympia. I'm a lawyer in town and with the Gentry Wheeler and Trino. And I think I probably got tagged for this because I'm the president of the West Olympia Business Association.
My name is Mike Reed. I'm the Senior Manager of Business Development at the Port of Olympia.
I'm George Sharp. I live in West Olympia, and I'm the Executive Director of the Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, and Desiree Connection.
And I'm Chris Goddard, and I'm a citizen who has been deeply interested in a serious downtown Atlanta. We can get right now. Sorry. And I'm Rachel Newman. I'm from the Heritage Commission.
I'm Dennis Bloom, live in Olympia, but planning manager at Inner City Transit.
Good evening, I'm Renee Sundy. I serve as Deputy Director for the Thurston Economic Development Council.
Dara Black, Senior Transportation Planner for Thurston Regional Planning Council.
Max Brown, Olympia Planning Commission.
I'm Bill Robinson, and I'm on the Capital District Park Association.
Jerry Briley, Chair of the Olympia Capital Park Foundation.
Paul Knox, I direct here United Way of Thurston County. I'm also an investor in residential properties in Olympia.
Alan Miller, Olympia School Board Member.
Teresa Madden, representing the Olympia Yacht Club.
I'm Steve Miner, I'm the house member, and I live over at the Bingo House, so I look forward to that.
I'm Mayor Pro Tem Nathaniel Jones, and I wanted to ask you to use your mics. But it's tricky, apparently, that we can only have, I think, 5 on at any one time. So if you'd mind your buttons, it would be helpful for us to all hear each other.
So let's briefly hear from folks in our audience too. Walt.
Walt Jordan.
Judy Barton, Planning Commission. Mouthful.
Oh, Tom's Bristles.
Venice University's partner.
Bob Jacobs, member of the board of the Isthmus Park Foundation.
Kim Anderson, Planning Commissioner.
And Lee, I'm glad you're enjoying your pizza, but do you want to introduce yourself now?
Lee Montague, member of the board of the Olympic Park Foundation.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you all for being here and taking time. So let's go to Renee, followed by Bill.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could give a little bit more of a background about how the decision on looking at PDA as being premature, just the thoughts behind that part of the thinking.
So I'll ask my colleagues to help me, but I'll start. our sense was that we're just trying to get a handle on CRA at this point and educate ourselves and educate this advisory committee as to what different tools are available. We're not sure we have a fit yet for CRA. I mean, frankly, I think the ad hoc committee is feeling positive about what we've learned and what tools are available and what we can do. But we don't have a go at this point. And until that time, and until we see whether it fits and whether it feels right, it feels premature to establish a new organization with new authority in order to carry that forward. I think for me, the rejoinder to your question is, well, when will it feel right? And I'm not sure I can answer that question.
My follow-up would be, if indeed then the council would be the governing board, how do you see the council intersecting with the development community and the stakeholders, and to assure that decisions and really just how it's used as a tool is effective for that community as well?
I think you asked a good question, and I don't think we have fully formulated that yet. Frankly, I think this group is providing some of that for us now. I think it's obvious to me that once we actually start taking actions on the ground and moving further with specific recommendations, we're going to need more help. And the complexion of the group that's advising us and helping us through that may change. But I think that your question is critical to our success, and I don't know that we have laid that out at this point as to just how that feedback is going to work. And actually, it's more than the council take a step and we get feedback. Instead, it really is joining hands. And I think that in some ways, that's what distinguishes CRA from so many other tools that we have available to us.
Right, I do think that that's going to be really critical moving forward. And you know, I even kind of look around the room tonight and I see that most of who's back at this meeting are really those of us that this is what we do for our day jobs, you know. And we've lost some of the development community and the real estate folks. And I just really think that that's going to be critical if we are to use this tool effectively, that they're engaged at the table and that they don't see the council as being a deterrent to why they would want to engage in the process. In other words, looking at challenges in the past as how they would see a forward process working. And so I think that that will be a challenge in how we work together. Yeah.
Steve, you want to respond as well?
Yeah, maybe I can just tackle this in a slightly different direction. I think at this point, we're looking for simplicity. Because things aren't all figured out yet and all the details aren't worked out, it's just simpler for the time being for the council to take that role. As we continue to develop this and refine it, then I think we will revisit this. So I don't see this at all as a final decision. It's just this is what we're doing right now kind of decision.
And I appreciate what I've heard from both my colleagues. I couldn't agree more. I think that my own emphasis is that it is a start, and this is all about relationship building and trust building. So keeping it simple at first, I think, is a good thing. I recognize that the success of community renewal areas that have worked elsewhere, it's a long-term process and it's a building process. So it's a toolkit to bring to bear on some staggering challenges in terms of our downtown. It also gives us the framework for partnerships with the private sector. I think that your observations are really good ones in terms of who's at the table and how we change the tone and tenor of our conversation around community development in this community, which I think is a big part of what we're trying to accomplish. And if we don't have a table that is well set and inviting for all of the different issues, or all of the different interests that keep a community healthy, we're not going to be a healthy community. So we recognize, I think, that we have some work to do. And part of it is setting the table where we have this group, which is, I think, a really respectful, hard-working group of people that if we can figure out how to jumpstart this conversation, I think we're going to go somewhere. But keeping it simple and starting small. So I'm going to go to Bill, and then I'm going to go to Chris and Dennis. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm seeing around the corner here. So Bill, Jerry, help me with the order. Okay, so Bill, Chris, Dennis, and Paul, and Rachel. I'm gonna make a list.
I just did, I got you.
Lorelei's got my back, so Bill.
Well, this is very much on the same lines that we were just talking about. For this process, whether you agree to go forward with the CRA or not, it's still discussion. I think this group has a pretty good understanding because we talked about it at some depth at prior meetings. But the really key to make this work, regardless of go or don't go, is going to be that governance structure and the trust and visibility and transparency that kind of comes out of that. And it's pretty much exactly the same type of question that Renee asked, but we just dig a little bit deeper because in this options you look at, identified one of the pros. Excuse me. One of the pros of the board, appointed board, was that there was a separation between the council and the development projects themselves. Where the city council, that's not really a pro. I'm trying to tease out a little bit, really what, it's not a con item. So what is the kind of the connection in terms of analysis that you went through to make sure that there was a clear separation in that? Should that continue under this arrangement?
I'll give it a shot. I'd first suggest that it's hard to imagine that development decisions in this community could ever have a political aspect to them. So I think that's what's meant by, there may be benefits of separation of governance over the CRA activity from the political scene. And I think to some extent, we're invited to gauge our own community and how it would interface and how these different alternatives would work in Olympia. So I think you're suggesting there may be some inconsistency, but my sense is that it has more to do with right sizing and picking the alternative that fits our local need. Again, I would emphasize what we've said, which is we need something simple to get started with, to learn whether we're going to go forward, rather than to get complex now. And it may very well be appropriate for one of these other methods to be applied at a later date. And I think that also we're going to be doing a lot of learning as we move forward. So, but I want to agree with what I heard the mayor say, that observations that I'm hearing from you tonight are really beneficial to our dialogue. So thank you already for the feedback that's contained in your questions. And I guess I'd turn to Lorelei. Did you have something to add to that response?
Right, so in terms of the pros associated with separation, it is a little bit of that separation from the sways of the political wind associated with development, but it's also a consistency in terms of approach over a period of time that spans an elected cycle. So that would be the pro. The con is that it is an autonomous body that can't necessarily be closely controlled by the city council because it's an autonomous body. So that's the trade-off there.
So I want to go to Chris, and then Dennis, Paul, Rachel.
Well, first of all, I like the second option the best, but I would like it a lot more if there were a group, sort of, well, like the citizens advisory groups that we have created to be a part of the ongoingness of this. You work so hard, I don't even know if you want to come back next week, much less in 2 years or 4 years. So there's got to be some continuity, and I think a manageably sized citizens group would be a nice kind of auxiliary to this. And I'm also wondering if at some point tonight we can maybe learn why we don't have maybe developers here.
I do know that Jim Morris is under surgery today, so that's why he's not here.
And we had a number of conflicts, so it was not, I think some of it is serendipitous, but I have had pretty vigorous and ongoing conversations with the developers. And one of the things that we have been talking about holistically in terms of, again, our larger council goal of changing the approach to community development in this community is considering, a developers roundtable, promoting more conversations within the community that can move us to a different level that isn't dominated so much from folks on extreme, ends of the spectrum, where, and I think I characterized this in our small group meetings as well as the large group meetings of, perspective of I'm going to build this no matter what, and to the perspective of you're going to build that over my dead body. And to the extent that we just have conversations dominated from the fringe rather than really respectful engagement of problem solving around how do we move forward on quality community development that matches the interests of our community at large. And I think I've got a positive response from every developer in sort of saying, yeah, we want to be part of that conversation.
So you're still talking?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Dennis.
Thanks. Actually, I did have a question for Lorelei. Some of the more technical pieces, very brief though. But it was good to have the spectrum of opportunities, because it was actually very interesting to see that, and it sort of fit with my own perceptions of those things. But
Are you talking about the, I'm getting there.
and the matrix of
This one?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, because I think it helped clarify some of the previous conversations that we've had around this table, and with the development community too, I think. So to go back to your slide of the map, sorry about that. I was trying to figure out the three colors of what that represents between blue and orange.
So those are the three options that the ad hoc committee considered for different boundaries for the community renewal area.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, so the red would be just focused on the isthmus. The orange is contiguous with how downtown is considered in your comprehensive plan document, and then the blue has a robot arm up to grab reliable steel.
So this is simply the observation, and I'm curious how this fits with the comp plan, the process the city council is going through, especially in terms of the number 2 recommendation that you're coming up with. Is just curious how that fits, how does that play out with the fact that you're reviewing the comp plan, the recommendations that the planning commission is making, and does that have a relationship, you think, going forward to doing the CRA?
So I'll start, and then the chair of our land use committee can rescue me as we go down. But I'm actually interested in input from and Keith particularly, if you have some things to share, or Max from a planning commission perspective. So the initial drivers in terms of the boundary, and I think that this is consistent in terms of the larger comprehensive plan objectives that we're looking for in terms of affordable housing in downtown, complementary development to reinforce the transportation patterns that we think that we need to build some economy of scale around, and concentrating density in a way that, again, is complementary to the character and quality of our downtown community. So the things that are clearly barriers to investment and community development in our downtown are the inhibiting factors that we went through. The very basic, specific things around aging infrastructure, challenges around storm surge, liquefaction, soil contamination, fragmented ownership. All those different things are inhibitors, and the area and the boundary that we're considering, all of those factors exist within that boundary. So the common denominator in all of the areas of interest, and those same factors are inhibitors to development. And the desire, again, is to make sure that we're creating an opportunity site that is going to be the appropriate legacy for a community renewal area. That it's not just a one-time kind of project. It is one that is focused on creating a whole vision for waterfront development that will be filled in over time. And actually, I mean, in some ways, this sort of segues to some of the things that I think we anticipate the community renewal area sort of working us towards, which is a more comprehensive approach to development strategies that will work for our downtown. But with the realization that, and I think this is a common denominator between downtown and the other opportunity sites, I would suggest that if we don't approach this in a conscious way, the development's still going to happen. If we don't figure out a way to structure a means of doing private-public partnerships, it's still going to happen. It's just going to happen without the informed vision that I think we're trying to go for.
So probably the simplest way I can say to answer your question is that I see the community renewal area as a tool for comprehensive plan implementation. So it's one more tool that we have available to actually achieve what it is that we're looking through the comprehensive plan. And that actually at some point we may choose to add another opportunity sites as they sort of move up the scale, if you will, or if there's something that happens that we can't foresee at the present time. So I don't really see, I really see this as just one more way of getting at what it is that we're trying to achieve. And of course, one of the things that this council has committed itself to is to have a meaningful comprehensive plan, one that doesn't just have sort of high-minded sounding words in it, but actually relates to what happens, rather than simply saying it and then letting it collect dust somewhere while things happen, just like the mayor was talking about anyway, but without us being able to shape what happens in a way that's consistent with the community vision.
So, I guess part of it is simply, so do you anticipate that whatever action happens at the CRA level is separate from the comp plan? Or is it accommodation, or does it become a part of?
I see it as a way to implement what we, as one of the tools that we then have available to us to implement what we want to have happen through the comp plan. So I really see the comp plan as the thing that we look to to see, and then the CRA being a way to get at some of those goals that we have in the comp plan, not the other way around, and not a parallel independent process.
And by statute, the CRA has to be consistent with the comp plan. And that's actually in the statute. So it's a required connection.
And I think we as a council are committed to not just this, I mean, the spirit as well as the sort of letter of that law.
I really don't have much to add other than I agree with Councilmember Langer that this is an implementation tool, and it's an implementation tool that has to be consistent with your comprehensive plan. So what we're talking about is implementing our comprehensive plan, both as it's currently drafted, our 1994 plan, and our new 2014 plan. So one way or the other, we're talking about tools and methods of implementing our comprehensive plan. And I don't think there's anybody who thinks that what's currently existing in our blighted areas in our community is implementing our comprehensive plan.
So Paul, followed by Rachel.
Sure. I don't know how important this is, lights on, but, first of all, I'm really pleased with the boundaries. I had heard some noise a month or two ago that it was going to be narrower. I'm really pleased that it takes in that whole area. I think it enables flexibility and ability to do some multiple things at once or in time, so that's good. When I read the memo and thought about it, I was pleased that you started out with the council option, and that's because, first of all, it takes a while to get a PDA up and running if we're going to start a new one, and that I wouldn't want to be slowed down by that. And two, it's mostly about accountability, at least at this point, and the accountability is going to be on the council's shoulders. But the pros of the PDA list, that means being entrepreneurial, aggressive, and that's a lot to shoulder. But it's going to be up to kind of us and it's going and you to make sure all the stakeholders are involved. I really agree with Renee's comments and concerns. So I think to make this happen, as you all keep saying, it's got to be a private-public partnership, and that's really going to have to be. You're going to have to work hard to draw those folks out. So that's where I'm at. And if we keep moving ahead, maybe a PDA would be the right thing, but we got to make something happen first.
Thanks. Rachel?